There's just so much more to hear.
Download our podcasts at DubaiI1038.com.
Let's talk oil now. Massive meeting taking place in Vienna tomorrow. Not just OPEC members like the UAE and Saudi Arabia, but also the guys from Russia are going to be there to try and prop up the oil price. In the Austrian capital is the long-standing oil correspondent and indeed OPEC correspondent, Eithne Treanor. She joins us on the line. Morning, Eithne.
Good morning, Richard.
Good to hear from you.
And indeed, massive meeting, and it's a wonderful time here in Vienna. It's just the most beautiful summer. We've probably got everything going, and hopefully a little bit of harmony with OPEC and non-OPEC as well. So if all that happens, it's going to be a great week here.
So who are the key players who are going to be in Vienna tomorrow? Who are the ones you're going to be, in terms of personalities, the one you're watching the most closely?
Well, obviously we've been, what has happened in this meeting and what is making it so different, I think, than any else is Russia's involvement, and it's absolutely essential involvement in many ways. Russia leads the 10-country non-OPEC sort of friends, what has made the OPEC Plus. And obviously what they say will obviously have a great deal of influence in terms of what everybody else is looking at. And over the last few months, we've seen tremendous support coming out of Russia, but some hesitancy as well. A lot of that hesitancy, I think, coming from pressure from many of the private companies that are actually saying to the minister, Alexander Novak, that they really want to, they've done their part now and perhaps it's time to just get back to business. However, at the G20 meeting this weekend, we heard from the top man himself, President Vladimir Putin, who was having intimate meetings, of course, with the Saudi Crown Prince, and everybody seems to be on great terms there, that they would definitely support the work that OPEC is doing and actually continue to be an active part of this agreement. So this agreement's been in place now for several years, 1.2 million barrels a day production adjustment, as OPEC likes to call it, but basically, yes, it is taking 1.2 million barrels a day off the market, holding that off, and thereby what they would say stabilizing a market that has been out of balance for quite some time.
Remind people who are driving to work this morning in the UAE, either going to work in a steel factory or selling software or working in a hotel, why this meeting and meetings like this are so important for the UAE economy. Spell that out for us, if you would.
I think it all comes down to the concept of, and the UAE minister, Suhail al-Mazroui, has said it many, many times, that it is about balancing the market and making sure that we're in where supply and demand meet that sweet spot. Now, that hasn't happened for a while, and we're looking at the market right now, and it still maybe is unbalanced. We're seeing inventories been drawn down from the U.S., but healthy demand there. That is the one thing that has actually held up. And when we look at the state of the global economy, that demand is certainly going to stay. It's maybe not going to be as robust as it's been in years past, but it's still, we're seeing for the near future, 5 years beyond, demand for oil and demand for energy growing. And that comes down to obviously the growth of the middle class around the world, growth of more income, and people looking for obviously more gasoline in their cars. They're more mobile. Everything has to be fueled. Energy is keeping us all alive. But again, it's very important that price become a sweet spot as well. It needs to be above 60. I would say some people would like it to be maybe a little bit more, but the OPEC members seem happy enough for it where it is above 60 to make sure that there's enough appetite for investment, basically. If the price goes way too high, there's nothing like a high price to kill a high price. That's what many of the analysts actually say, and vice versa on the low side as well. Because if the price is too high, we're looking at a situation where there will be no investment. And that vicious cycle then happens whereby it'll affect employment, the price just gets too high, and demand destruction hits in, and then we go back into the spiral again. On the downside, if the price becomes too low, while it might sound good for the consumer, and this is what we hear from President Trump occasionally, to put more oil on the market and therefore lower the price, ultimately what happens is there will be no investment, and that appetite for investment in the industry, which is a long-term investment. It's not about thinking today and doing it next week. It really is 5-year plans and that. So it's a tough situation, and again, it's not like a normal market. So the interventions that happen in the oil market, I believe, and many other analysts, of course, believe are absolutely necessary.
Finally, a quick word, Eithne, on renewable energy. It's almost ironic that we've got this big oil meeting taking place in Vienna and the UAE energy minister going there. But in Abu Dhabi today, we've got the big green climate change event happening. We got the UN Secretary General Guterres speaking in Abu Dhabi. How big a threat to oil producers like Abu Dhabi are renewable energies like solar, like wind? Can they replace oil anytime soon?
I don't think the Abu Dhabi government or the UAE government is seeing renewable energy as a threat. And if we look at the narrative, Richard, in the last few years, they're very much welcoming this. I mean, we're also looking perhaps down the road, and the reality, I think, of the industry is that there will be a shift in oil usage rather than burning it into the petrochemical industry, and the investment, particularly in the UAE, in a huge petrochemical complex in Ruwais is ongoing at the moment, with lots of international companies involved and setting up joint ventures in that. Without a doubt, the shift is happening. We are in this very exciting energy transition, whereby we're also looking at, I think, huge growth in energy demand, and also looking at the fact that people will need oil, they'll need gas, they'll need renewables, they'll need wind, solar, you name it. But the potential for the demand in energy to grow is absolutely huge.
Eithne Treanor joining us from the Austrian capital, where the big OPEC and Russia meeting takes place tomorrow.
There's just so much more to hear.
Download our podcasts at DubaiEye1038.com.